My name is Riley. I'm 28 years old, a marketing director at a tech corporation in New York. Just last week, after 6 exhausting months of negotiations, I finally closed a contract worth $3.5 million. I thought coming home this time would be the moment to celebrate with my family in the house where I spent my entire childhood, the house my father left us after he passed away. But instead, I stepped out of the taxi, dragging my suitcase and carrying a small gift I'd bought for my mom, only to freeze under the afternoon sundae. 20 black trash bags lined up neatly on the sidewalk, each one tied tightly, bulging as if packed with an entire lifetime thrown away. On the front lawn, the sign, "For sale, sold," swayed in the wind. My mother stood at the top of the porch steps, arms crossed, her face expressionless. Beside her were my brother Ethan, my sister Claire, and my youngest brother Darren, all of them staring at me as though I were a stranger. "The house isn't yours anymore. We sold it, and your share will be cut down to almost nothing. Have you ever been treated as a burden by your own family? Cast out into the street when you thought you were finally about to be acknowledged? Leave a comment if you've ever been betrayed by the people closest to you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss what happened next, because what they did afterward was far crueler." I stood there, my hands still gripping the suitcase handle, my breath heavy and caught in my chest. Everything around me felt suffocated by the dramatic silence of blood relatives staring as if I didn't belong here, as if I had never belonged. I heard the wind sweep across the sold sign on the lawn, and the sound echoed in my head like a hammer sealing the final door between me and what used to be called family. But I said nothing. I couldn't. Something lodged in my throat, bitter, salty, harder to swallow than any cruel word ever thrown at me. My mother, Linda, still wore that porcelain cold expression, stripped of all feeling. She looked at me without a hug, without the slightest flicker of guilt. Just a distant gaze, as distant as the years I grew up beside her. Always trying, always hoping, always being left behind. "You can't keep clinging to this house forever, Riley," she said, her tone as calm as if she were talking about the weather. "Ethan and Claire moved out when they were 23. You're 28. It's time you stood on your own." Her words landed like a blow to my temple. I forced a smile, crooked and trembling. "I cover nearly all the property taxes every year. I fixed the roof when it leaked, replaced the entire plumbing last year, even helped pay your credit card debt in June. Standing on my own? Then what am I, a ghost?" Claire folded her arms, standing next to Mom, and let out a short sigh. "We know you tried. But staying here this long has blinded you to everything else. We had to create some distance." I looked at Ethan. He avoided my eyes, nudging the porch step with his shoe. "And what about my share of the house?" I asked, my voice steady though quiet. "Dad split it equally among all 4 of us. I have a right." "Yes," Mom nodded. "But after subtracting the rent you never paid, utilities, food, all the years you lived here, there isn't much left." I laughed, a dry laugh like desert soil after a drought. "So everything I ever did just gets turned into debt?" No one answered. I remembered the day Dad died. I was only 10, while Ethan and Claire were already starting college. The house grew quieter, and I quickly realized my place in Mom's eyes wasn't what it used to be. She piled everything on me. Washing dishes, cleaning floors, caring for Grandpa when he was ill, driving her to appointments, all were my duties. Ethan was the pride, Claire was the classed, thoughtful one. Every time they came home, Mom cooked their favorites, laid out fresh tablecloths, even told me to mind my tone, to not talk too much. I was always the last to know anything important. Claire's wedding, I was invited 3 weeks before it happened. Ethan started his own business, I heard from the neighbor. Even when Grandpa passed away, I had been the one caring for him in his final days, but Mom was the one giving the eulogy. And now, When I thought I'd finally achieved enough to be recognized, what I got instead was 20 trash bags lined up on the curb. "I am not the burden of this family," I whispered, every word sharp as a blade cutting through the thick air. "I'm the one who kept it from collapsing these past 18 years. But it seems nobody ever saw that." I turned away, walked to the bags, and opened them one by one. My business jacket from client presentations, the high heels I bought with overtime pay. Underneath, the wool scarf I knitted for Mom at 17, still with the little card tucked inside. "Mom, stay warm." All of it crammed together in a bag, memories and trash indistinguishable. I picked up the scarf, brushed off a thin layer of dust, and stood up. "I'll have everything cleared before sundown," I said, eyes fixed not on them, but on the taxi engine idling at the curb. "But this isn't independence. This is an eviction." Mom didn't answer, but I caught a flicker in her eyes only to see it freeze again. I stepped inside, past the doorway where Dad used to wait for me after piano lessons, past the kitchen that once smelled of holiday pies I baked, even when no one ever thanked me. I gathered what remained of my life here, from my study corner to the picture frames face down against the wall. On the bookshelf lay an old album. I flipped a few pages. Thanksgiving last year I wasn't in it. Ethan's 30th birthday, the whole family raising glasses. I had worked the entire day. Nobody told me. The last photo I found was from my college graduation, me, standing in the quad, draped in a deep blue gown. Mom wasn't in the picture. I remembered clearly I had to hire my own photographer because she said she was busy with a women's club meeting. But she sent flowers to Claire's master's graduation with a card that read, "You are the light of my life." I placed the frame gently into a box, taped it shut, then looked around the room one last time. I wondered how many others have been pushed out of the place called family not because they did wrong, but because they didn't fit the roles others forced on them. How many have worked tirelessly only to be erased with a single sold sign? And most of all, how long does it take us to understand that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from enemies, but from the very hands that once rocked us to sleep? I walked out, carrying the box pressed to my chest. Mrs. Peterson from across the street watched me, as if trying to grasp what had just happened. Neighbors stepped onto their porches, some pretending to water plants, others peeking from behind curtains. The little street I grew up on, the place I once thought safest, now looked at me with eyes full of curiosity and pity. The box felt unbearably heavy, not just with belongings, but with exposure. I set it down beside the cab, stretching my back to breathe. My shirt stuck to me with sweat, not from the sun, but from the invisible weight pressing down on every step. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Riley," Mom called from the porch. "It's not like we're throwing you out at night. You still have the whole day to move." I turned, meeting her gaze. "The buyers want the keys by this afternoon. You may not call this being thrown out, but if not, then what is it?" Ethan shrugged, hands in his pockets. "We talked about this already. Didn't Mom tell you to think about your future?" I gave a short laugh. "Talked? You call it talked when all three of you, with Mom, sold the house behind my back and told me by tossing my stuff on the curb?" Claire shrugged, her tone flat, like shutting down an office argument. "You should see this as an opportunity. Starting late is better than never growing up." I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm, though my grip on my bag strap tightened. "And what about my share of the house? Dad's will clearly gave us equal parts." Mom sighed, turning away. "But you stayed too long. If you count the rent, utilities, all these years of living here, your share isn't much." "And what about all the work I put in?" I asked. "I paid for the roof repair, replaced the old pipes. I repainted the living room for you, used vacation days to take you to appointments. Every winter I shoveled snow, every overdue bill I quietly paid. You did those things because you lived here." Mom shot back. "No one forced you. And no one acknowledged it either, I muttered, barely audible. A strong gust rattled the sold sign against the lamppost. The sound felt like confirmation, like the slam of a door I once thought could never close. I bent down, kept opening the bags. A pair of new heels with crushed backs. A handwritten letter to Dad at 14, smudged with water. Each bag cut deeper, but I kept going. I wanted to reclaim everything of mine with my own hands, no one else deciding for me again. The gate creaked behind me. Darren, the youngest, walked over quietly. He carried 2 water bottles, handed me one, then stood awkwardly. "Do you need help?" I looked at him, and in his eyes, there was none of the coldness I saw in the others. I nodded. "You okay?" Darren asked. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." A little later, Mrs. Peterson came across the street with a neat cardboard box. I saw them throw a few things on the ground. "I found this frame, thought you'd want it." I bowed my head in thanks. Inside was a photo of me in senior year, white dress, smiling wide. Dad beside me, his hand on my shoulder. The frame was scratched, but the glass intact. I set it aside, apart from the mess. "This family doesn't feel like family anymore," I whispered, barely more than a breath. "Mrs. Peterson laid a hand on my shoulder. "Family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's where you're allowed to be yourself." I watched her walk back, her words lingering like church bells on a quiet afternoon, slow, resonant, impossible to forget. When I stepped back inside for the last items, Mom was still standing there, saying nothing. Her eyes as cold as a mirror, reflecting nothing but emptiness. I no longer cared what she felt. Through the living room, once home to Christmas trees and warm yellow evenings, waiting for her return, now stripped bare, walls white, footsteps echoing. I opened the front door. The late sun spilled across my face, bright but warm. One final memory flickered like sunlight on hardwood. Dad's laughter, cinnamon in the kitchen, Mom's hands braiding my hair when I was little. But all of it was past. What I needed now was a place where no one could throw me out, no one could measure my worth by whether I moved out by a certain age. Above all, I needed a life where I didn't have to prove I deserved love from people who never intended to give it. As I pulled the 14th bag, my hand snagged on stiff paper. Among the jumble of old clothes and textbooks was a beige folder, edges curled with moisture but intact. I drew it out, brushed off the dust, and opened the flap. Bold letters hit me in the face. Residential property sale agreement, 421 Willow Creek Road. I straightened, heart pounding in my chest. Date signed, 3 months ago. Agent, Shelley Tanner of Tanner Realty. Signature, Linda J. Monroe, my mother. No mention of me, no line for my noun. Signature. I flipped through each page, checking every clause. Each line was clear, precise, and nowhere did it mention the need for consent from co-owners. I was one of 4 heirs in my father's will, yet here, the entire property was listed under my mother's name, as if I had never existed. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone. I opened the family group chat I rarely interacted with, too used to feeling like the outsider there. Hundreds of unread messages appeared. I scrolled back to 3 months earlier, right when I had been buried in a project in New York. The first message was from Ethan. "If Riley's away on that business trip as planned, we've got about 3 weeks to handle the sale." Claire replied right after. "Take pictures before she comes back. Don't let her stuff clutter the place." Mom sent a blurry photo. My bedroom, curtains pulled neatly, bed made flat, no photo frames or books left. "Shelley said we need to clear it out to make it easier to sell," Mom wrote. Ethan answered, "Don't forget to cover your tracks. If Riley finds out, it'll be a mess." I stood there frozen, not because I was being cut out, but because they had planned it all so carefully while I was losing sleep over clients, shuttling between meetings, imagining a warm family dinner after my trip. I scrolled further to 6 weeks ago. Claire had sent a photo of the neighborhood housing price chart. Prices are up almost 12%. If we wait for Riley to find out, it'll be too late. Ethan, she's not the legal owner. Mom can sign. Keep moving forward. I couldn't remember how I breathed in that moment. Whether I squeezed the phone so hard I nearly cracked it, or whether I sat down on the grass to keep from collapsing. All I remembered was the feeling like someone had cut the cord tying me to the word family. The most recent message from Claire made me sick. All done. Money will hit Mom's account next week. Riley's still in New York. Perfect timing. I shut off the screen, unable to take more. Darren walked out of the house, his eyes flicking from me to the folder in my hands. You found it. I looked at him, waiting for an explanation. It fell out of a pile of old books when I was cleaning upstairs. I couldn't bring myself to tell Mom. I said nothing. The wind tugged at my tangled hair, the evening sun stretching our shadows across the lawn. Maybe I should have felt relief that at least Darren still had a conscience. But the rest of me, crushed under the weight of their lies, no longer knew who I could trust. Did you know? I asked evenly. Every time I came home, I thought maybe they finally saw me as an adult. But all of that was just an act. Darren lowered his head, fingers twisting his shirt collar. Mom said, if we told you, everything would blow up. She said you were too sensitive, too quick to react, that it would all be simpler if you didn't know. I let out a short laugh, bitter in my throat. Simpler? That's how they describe selling out their daughter for a property? I'm sorry, Darren whispered. I shoved the folder into my bag and walked toward the car. Riley, Mom called. Where are you going? I stopped in the yard without turning around. To find a lawyer. There's no need to make this a big deal. You're overreacting, she raised her voice. I turned back, meeting her eyes from across the distance. My gaze carried no tears, no anger left. I'm not overreacting. For once, I'm reacting exactly as much as I should. I opened the car door, slid in, and shut it firmly. In the rearview mirror, my mother's figure shrank, and the house behind her, once filled with laughter, piano notes, and warm kitchen lights, now looked like a cold display home in a realtor's office. Only this time, no one there held my heart anymore. I pulled over a few blocks away, killed the engine, but didn't drive off. The wind slipped through the cracked window, carrying the scent of dry grass and hot asphalt. My phone lay still in my bag, as if waiting for me to be ready. I pulled it out, opened social media, just to look up the buyer and figure out when I could return to grab the rest of my things from the shed. But the very first notification froze me in place. My mother had posted a family photo taken in the backyard, right in front of the hydrangeas I had planted for her birthday last year. The picture was bursting with color, Claire beaming with a glass of red wine, Ethan with his arm slung around Mom's shoulder. Darren stood slightly behind, not quite looking at the camera. I wasn't in it. And beneath the photo was a neat caption. Sometimes love requires sacrifice. We had to give Riley a lesson so she could grow. I read it over and over, as if the words might rearrange themselves. But they didn't. They sat there blunt, undeniable, a public indictment that needed no trial. Over 30 shares, hundreds of likes and comments from relatives and Mom's old friends. So brave, Linda. Parenting is never easy. We had to do something similar with our daughter, too. Hopefully Riley will understand and thank you later. I scrolled further. A comment from Aunt Helen. So Riley won't be at Thanksgiving this year? That's sad, but maybe she needs time to think. And my mother replied beneath it, we canceled her invitation. She needs time to learn gratitude. My throat dried to sand. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, unable to speak. Not because I wasn't used to being misunderstood, but because my own family had spun a false narrative and broadcast it like a PR campaign. They painted me as selfish, ungrateful, in need of discipline, and all I had done was come home after 81 straight days of nonstop work. Another notification popped up. Claire had posted a story, a photo of a dinner, spread on the long wooden table outside, captioned, "Celebration dinner for a new chapter." In the center sat the bottle of wine I'd once bought for Dad the year he died. I remembered skipping a client lunch just to pick it up in time. Mom used to say she didn't drink, yet there she was in the photo, lifting her glass, lipstick bright, eyes glowing with joy. I stepped out of the car, desperate for air. Standing on a strange sidewalk in an unfamiliar neighborhood, I called Harper, the only person I could think of. "Where are you?" Her voice warm, urgent. "Outside. I'm not even sure where exactly." I choked. "I need a place to stay for a few days. Say no more. Come to me now. I'll clear out the living room." By the time I reached Harper's apartment in Elmhurst, night had fallen. She opened the door before I could knock. No questions, just arms wrapping me tight. I sank into her chest, feeling warmth so starkly different from the ice I'd left behind. "I've got pizza and a bottle of white left over from my birthday," Harper said, dragging my suitcase in. "And if you need to cry, the bathroom's stocked with tissues and a sad playlist." I gave a weak smile, my eyes still damp. "I don't think I can cry right now." We ate quietly. Harper didn't push, just waited until I was ready. After the second glass of wine, I handed her my phone, showing her mom's post. She read carefully, silent for a long time. Then she set the phone down and looked at me with startling calm. "You've got evidence, legal rights, and yourself," she said. "They've got what?" "A cheap story on social media." I nodded faintly, though my chest still ached. "It's not just the house, Harper. I've lost whatever was left of family. Relatives, cousins, people who once called me their darling. Now they've turned their backs like I never existed." Harper placed her hand on mine. "Some families are born, others we rebuild. From scratch, with the people who listen and don't betray." I sat there, staring at the candle flickering on the small table. Inside me, something was shifting, slowly, like water seeping through a crack long sealed, quiet but steady. I had spent too long playing roles, the agreeable daughter, the dependable employee, the sister who never complained. But they had torn off that mask for me. Now it was my turn to be real. Harper got up, grabbing a blanket and extra pillows. Over her shoulder, she called out, "Tonight, sleep. Tomorrow we'll plan. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't need to apologize for surviving." The next morning, I woke on Harper's pull-out sofa, neck stiff, head heavy after a restless night. Sunlight spilled weakly through the thin curtain, pale and weary, mirroring the weight inside me. I brewed coffee in her tiny kitchen, poured a cup, and sat at the table. Harper was still asleep, her door half shut. I didn't want to disturb her, she'd already done more than enough. I opened my laptop, started searching for rentals within a 10-mile radius. But as soon as I filled out the first application, the system flashed an error. A red notice appeared. "Applicant does not meet minimum credit requirements." I flinched. Every time I had checked, my credit score had been above 770. I lived frugally, paid every bill on time, never missed a single loan payment. I logged into my credit report. 10 minutes of identity verification later, the details loaded and my hands went numb. 5 delinquent accounts, totaling over $5,300. I opened the breakdown. Electricity, gas, internet, all accounts opened more than 7 years ago. The listed address was completely unfamiliar. A rundown apartment in the north end of town, a place I had never stepped foot in. Scrolling further, the account holder, Riley Monroe. Birth date, social security number, all mine. I froze, pieces clicking together. Back then, I had been a senior in college, working part-time at the library, living in the dorms. Ethan had just moved in with his girlfriend but was unemployed for nearly half a year. He once borrowed my student ID to check out books. I hadn't thought twice. Around that time, I received a utility bill under my name, but Mom brushed it off. Probably a system error, don't worry. I shut my eyes, breathing deep. This wasn't the sting of rejection anymore. It was a cold, simmering fury like embers burning under ash. What they had done wasn't just selling the house. They had stolen my identity to fix their mess, leaving behind consequences I hadn't even known existed. I tried 2 more rental applications, both rejected. I checked my inbox, 2 emails from property managers overnight, both denying me because of unreliable credit history. I snapped the laptop shut, leaned back in the chair. My eyes burned. Where was I supposed to start? Calling to dispute the charges? Filing fraud reports? How long would it take? How much would it cost in legal fees? And more pressing, would Ethan face criminal charges? I wasn't sure I wanted to see him arrested, but I wasn't sure he deserved forgiveness either. Harper came out, hair messy, holding a glass of water. She glanced at me, then walked closer. What's going on? I handed her the credit report. She skimmed through it, silent for nearly a minute. Then she looked up, her face pale with anger. Ethan? I nodded. And your mom never said a word? She kept quiet for nearly a decade, I said, my voice flat. Harper set the glass down so hard that droplets splashed onto the table. You can't let them keep wrecking your life like this. You have to fight back. File a claim. But I need a place to live first, I said, the words catching in my throat. The Seattle contract won't release the bonus until next month. My savings are drying up. Then stay. Here. As long as you need. No limits. I'll clear out the boxes in the office. I looked at her, lips trembling. There's something terrifying about realizing your own family destroyed you, while someone with no blood ties is the one reaching out without hesitation. I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition if you're my family, Harper said, resting a hand on my shoulder. And I don't say that out of pity. I said nothing, just nodded, feeling something inside me, an emptiness carved out long ago, being filled by the presence of someone who actually listened. That whole day, I called hotlines nonstop, the power company, the credit bureau, identity protection services. I took notes on every call, sent emails, uploaded scans of my documents. Each time I picked up the phone, I had to face the humiliation of proving I wasn't guilty, me, the one who had always paid every bill on time. By mid-afternoon, I dialed a small law office downtown, the same one Harper once took her mom to for a land dispute. The assistant, June, had a soft but quick voice. She scheduled me for Monday morning, reminding me, bring every document related to the debts, the unknown addresses, and your original credit report. I wrote it all down in my notebook, each line like an anchor, keeping me from sliding further into despair. That evening, I sat on Harper's balcony, watching car lights drift slowly along the street below. My life felt like a tangle of frayed threads. But in the middle of that mess, 2 things remained intact. My career, though shaken, and my stubborn resolve, a strength I had never named before. I only needed enough time to piece the threads back together in my own way. No more strings pulled by anyone else. And I would never again let anyone live under my name, at my expense, not even if they shared my blood. Monday came. Harper insisted on going with me, not because I wasn't strong enough, but because having someone by my side made me feel less alone in the face of something so big. The building sat on a narrow street near City Hall, its facade worn but warm, with the faint scent of pine wood and fresh ink. The waiting room was quiet, walls lined with framed degrees and portraits of clients who had won cases involving property, inheritance, and credit. My hands tightened around my bag strap, as if I were about to walk into a silent trial where the last 10 years of my life would be stripped bare. The door opened. A man in a light blue shirt, salt and pepper hair, steady smile, walked toward me. He extended his hand. "Miss Riley Monroe? I'm Thomas Davis." I shook his hand. His grip was warm, firm. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of stability I thought I had lost. He invited us into a small meeting room with a long wooden table and brown leather chairs. I pulled out the folder I had prepared, a copy of Dad's will, property tax records, the realtor contract I found in the trash bag, my damaged credit report, and the screenshots of family messages I had quietly saved. Thomas read through each document, marking with a red pencil, sometimes nodding, sometimes pursing his lips in thought. Harper sat quietly beside me, her hand resting on my knee, silently telling me, "You're doing the right thing, keep going." After nearly 40 minutes, Thomas looked up, removed his glasses, and set them down. "I'll be direct, Riley. You're in a much stronger position than you realize." I stared, not sure I understood. "This will is crystal clear. Your father split the house equally among 4 children. You are one of them. Even though your mother became the legal guardian after his death, ownership did not automatically transfer fully to her." I tightened my grip slightly. "So, the sale?" "Completely unlawful. For the transaction to be valid, all co-owners' signatures are required. Your mother could not unilaterally sell the entire Finer property." I shook my head. "But the paperwork is finished. They took the money. The buyer has already moved in. That's their problem. And the buyer can go after the realtor for failing to verify ownership. But you, Riley, you have the right to sue for compensation equal to your share of the property's value, plus damages for emotional distress and incurred costs." I leaned back. A weight loosened in my chest, as if an invisible chain had been cut. "So I can actually reclaim my part? Not just your part," he said evenly, "but also the dignity of being recognized as a co-owner deliberately excluded. If we prove concealment, we could even pursue punitive damages." I glanced at my notebook where I had scrawled through the night. "Is it fair? Is it worth it?" Harper spoke softly. "And if she doesn't fight, who protects people like Riley, or the next child who's called a burden for daring to come home?" Thomas nodded, tapping the stack of papers. "I've seen many cases like this. Rarely do we have evidence this strong." I swallowed hard. "If I file, will it drag on?" "Possibly months, depending on their response. But given the circumstances, they'll likely negotiate. I recommend we start with a legal warning letter demanding voluntary compensation. If they ignore it, we escalate." I nodded without hesitation. "I want to start now," he smiled. "Good. I'll draft the letter and send you a copy before it goes out. And Riley," I lifted my eyes, "you're not just protecting your property. You're reclaiming the respect stolen from you by the very people who should have defended it." Walking out, my steps were slow, not from fear, but because something deep inside me was shifting. No longer weakness, no longer anger, just clarity. Harper glanced at me. "You okay?" I smiled, softly, genuinely. "I think I've found the one thing that makes me stop fearing them." "What's that?" "The right to finally say, I won't stay silent another second." One gloomy afternoon in early October, I was adjusting slides for a client meeting in Chicago when my phone rang. The number on the screen was so familiar my hand nearly dropped the coffee cup. Linda, my mother. I let it ring twice, then silenced it. Not because I didn't want to answer, but because I needed a few seconds to brace myself for a voice that could shatter or freeze me. The second call came immediately after. I picked up, saying nothing first. On the other end came ragged, broken breaths, as if she had been running or crying until she was empty. Riley, honey, I don't even know where to start. I stayed silent, waiting for her to gather the scattered pieces of her words. I lost everything, all of it. The house money, I invested it on Timothy's advice. You remember him? Your dad's old colleague. I heard dishes clatter in the background, her sobs choking as if she were swallowing air. He said there was a fund. Quick returns. 20% in 3 months. Guaranteed. Everyone joined in. I didn't question it. Ethan put money in. Claire too. My chest tightened. Not at her loss, but at the way she spoke like I was the only one left to listen, as if those months of silence, of erasing me from family photos, had never happened. I need you, Riley. Ethan and Claire won't talk to me. They say I ruined everything. I don't have a place to live. I just need somewhere temporary. I'll find work, anything. Cleaning, babysitting, gardening. I just need somewhere to start over. I leaned my head against the wall, memories flooding back. Nights curled on Harper's sofa, rejection letters piling up, sleepless hours over a credit crisis I hadn't caused. And the image of my mother, glass raised at a new chapter dinner, while I scraped coins for cardboard boxes. Do you have your own place now? She asked quietly, cautiously. Or are you still with Harper? I answered softly, like a breeze. I'm renting near the office. Haven't moved into anything permanent yet. Maybe. I don't need a room. The sofa is fine, just a few weeks. I didn't reply right away. I walked to the window, looking down at the quiet street lined with trees turning crimson. I thought of Harper, of the way she had handed me warm towels after panic attacks, of her steady eyes when I read rejection emails aloud. I'll think about it, I said. But I need a few things clear. She was silent. Then, anything. Say it. My voice was steady. No living together. If you need a place, I'll help you find one, but not in my personal space. Just temporary, Riley. No, I cut in. I don't live temporary anymore, and I'm no longer the shadow of this family, patching everyone's mistakes while staying quiet. I heard sniffles on the line. They didn't pull me under. Where would I go? She asked, barely a whisper. Senior housing with low-income support. I'll chip in if needed. But there's a condition. What condition? Therapy. Weekly sessions. I'll only support you if you agree to it, and no unnecessary contact. We need space. Silence stretched. I thought she had hung up, but then a sigh came through. Not weary, resigned. You've changed a lot. I smiled, not to mock her, but as if to affirm something to myself. I haven't changed. I just stopped trying to please a family that never had room for me. She didn't respond. I could hear the faint sound of wind through the receiver. I'll think about what you said, she finally murmured. Thank you for not hanging up. I ended the call and stood there for a long time, giving my body time to absorb what had just happened, that I had refused a piece of my past that once served as shelter. At the same time, I had chosen a piece of my future, clearer, with boundaries, and no longer built on guilt. That night, I sat in front of my computer, drafting and redrafting the personal agreement I planned to give my mother. Every line was carefully measured, not a word wasted. Not because I wanted to control her, but because I was exhausted from concessions that had never been acknowledged. If she truly needed help, she would have to accept responsibility for what she had done. I printed 2 copies, sealed them in an envelope, and included the address of a senior housing facility Harper had once recommended. The place was quiet, with a garden, only a few blocks from a small church and close to a bus stop. It was affordable, with regular counseling services available. I had called ahead, confirmed availability, prepaid the first month's rent, and wrote in the letter, "After the first month, I will continue partial support, provided you follow the conditions." We agreed to meet at a small cafe in the southern part of the city, a place where no one knew us, where she wouldn't be surrounded by familiar faces who always sided with her. I chose a seat on the patio, near a bougainvillea trellis. She arrived 15 minutes late, walking slowly, hair pinned up, coat wrinkled as though pulled hastily from the bottom of her bag. I stood when she approached. She didn't hug me, didn't smile. We sat down together on a gray Sunday afternoon, no rain but enough wind to stir the thin scarf draped over her shoulders. "I've thought it over," I said, placing the envelope in front of her. "If you truly need support, this is what I can offer." She looked at it but didn't touch it. "What papers are those?" "Everything necessary to ensure I can help you without compromising my own safety anymore." She raised her brows, lips pressed tight. "You'll have your own place. I've already spoken with management. If you agree to attend weekly family therapy sessions, I'll continue to cover part of the rent." She let out a dry laugh. "I thought you'd open your door and let me in, like a daughter should with her mother." "I'm not refusing to help, but I won't allow anyone, not even you, to invade my space without respecting boundaries. I'm your mother, and I'm your daughter. But you told the neighbors I was a burden. You let Ethan open accounts in my name. You stood by while the others pushed me out of the house. And now you come here expecting me to forget?" She pulled her hands off the table, shoulders stiff. "So you're using rules against your own mother?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took out one last sheet, the legal statement from Thomas Davis, confirming my 25% ownership of the house sold illegally. I placed it beside the envelope. "I don't need rules to force you. But if you think I'll keep living as a shadow, you're wrong." She looked down at the document, her eyes narrowing. "You want to sue the family?" "I don't want to sue anyone. I want to reclaim respect." Silence hung between us, broken only by the sound of a spoon clinking against a cup at the next table. The wind carried the scent of roasted coffee and damp air, leaving a chill on my skin, the chill of words never spoken before. "What else?" she asked, eyes fixed on the table's edge. "No, using my identity, my accounts, or any personal information without written consent. It's all written in there." "You're talking to your mother like you're negotiating with a client," she spat. "Because everything I once said as your daughter," I replied, "you refuse to hear." Her expression shifted, no longer angry but lost. I didn't see the powerful woman who once held her head high. Sitting across from me was someone who had lost nearly everything, not because fate was cruel, but because she once believed she could control everyone around her unconditionally. "What am I signing?" she asked, pen in hand. "An acknowledgement of the conditions for support. Not legally binding, just personal boundaries. If you break them, I stop helping immediately." "Do I have another option?" I stayed silent. She exhaled hard, as if forcing herself over an invisible line. Then she signed. Her full name, Linda J. Monroe. I folded the paper and slipped it into my bag. "The keys will be given to you on Tuesday. They'll guide you through the rules. I've also arranged for you to meet with the counselor there, Mrs. Celia Nguyen. Your first session is this Friday." She said nothing more. Her eyes drifted to the bougainvillea, her gaze neither sad nor defiant. For the first time in our entire conversation, she was silent, not to resist, but to listen. We stood. I paid for the coffee without waiting for her to offer. On the sidewalk, she turned to me, gripping her bag strapped tightly. "You're never going to ask me to live with you again, are you?" I looked at her for a long moment, then shook my head. "I'm building a new life. There's no space for old wounds to slip back in." She nodded slightly. There were no tears, no begging, just a quiet, "Okay." And a figure fading into the busy street. I moved into my new apartment on a late winter morning. Not a grand villa or a luxury penthouse, but a space just right, 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a south-facing balcony for sunlight, and most importantly, no one but me held the keys. The moving truck pulled up at 8 a.m. Harper arrived earlier, carrying egg sandwiches and coffee from the cafe near her office. She shoved one into my hand and dragged my red suitcase into the lobby like we were setting off on a trip, not relocating my life. I laughed, lighter than I had in years. "Are you sure you want to hang those pictures yourself?" Harper asked as we loaded boxes onto the cart. "I've been waiting for this moment for so long," I said, holding the box of photos my mother once called messy, gloomy, not worth hanging. Among them was a shot of me hiking in Vermont, mist rolling over mountains, golden light breaking through like a dream. Another captured a cornfield at harvest, heavy ears swaying in the wind. My favorite was a lake at dawn, water so still it mirrored the sky like glass. That was where I sat for hours after being thrown out, drafting a new plan for my life. Harper helped me place each frame, measuring with a pencil as if setting up an exhibit. When the last was hung, she stepped back, tilting her head. "They tell a story," she said. "Not about where you've been, but how you survived." I only nodded. The feeling couldn't be put into words. A peace that required no validation, no apology, no dependence on anyone's approval. At work, things shifted too. No one asked if I was still crashing with a friend or settled yet. They looked at me differently now with trust. The Seattle project had been a resounding success, but the real surprise came from a new client, a West Coast healthcare chain with a $5 million marketing budget. I led the pitch, weaving my personal story into the campaign. Recovery isn't just medical. It's the journey of redefining yourself. Barbara, the CEO, nodded as I wrapped up, her eyes lit with approval. "When someone truly understands rebirth, they create strategies people believe in," she said to the board. "No one is better suited than Riley." The next week, I received my promotion letter, head of strategic marketing, leading a team of nearly 40 with authority over national campaigns. In her handwritten note, Barbara added, "Not everyone dares to step out from under family shadows. You didn't just step out, you stepped past." I chose a light oak desk for my apartment. Every morning, I sat by the window, writing reports, sketching strategies, or simply watching sunlight scatter across the rug like spilled gold. I reorganized my finances, opened a dedicated savings account for long-term goals. Every number, every expense was mine to decide. No reminders to send it to mom, no texts from Ethan asking to borrow just for now. I reset all my passwords, locked down my credit report to prevent unauthorized access, and hired a personal monitoring service. Thomas, my attorney, kept tracking the lawsuit. The realtor's firm was pushing for out-of-court settlement, offering compensation equal to my share. I hadn't decided yet. Not because I wanted to stall, but because I no longer felt rushed to reclaim anything. I wanted to handle it in a way that didn't compromise myself. Harper still visited on weekends. We baked, played jazz, folded laundry, and shared silly stories from social media. She called my apartment a guided cocoon, while I called it a space with no one standing behind me. One evening, reading emails under the soft lamplight, I opened an old folder on my laptop. Inside was a forgotten photo, me and Dad on the front steps of the old house. 4th grade, hair tied high, cheeks round, holding the film camera he had just given me. Dad's smile wide, his arm draped around my shoulder. Behind us, the green door I once believed was the gateway to a place called home. I printed it, framed it, and set it carefully on the bookshelf. Not because I missed the old house, but because I wanted to remember there was once someone, however briefly, who believed in me without asking me to be anyone else. I named my Wi-Fi network Independent Riley. Harper chuckled when she found out. You really should print that on a shirt, she said, raising her coffee. Or make it the slogan for your next campaign. I didn't answer, just sipped quietly and gazed at the balcony. Out there, the late-day sun clung to the vines I had planted, glimmering like a silent blessing for a new beginning, one built entirely with my own hands and a heart no longer afraid of the dark. One early spring morning, I received a text from a staff member at the senior residence where my mother was living. The message was short. Miss Linda just completed her 40-second therapy session. Today she mentioned you and her tone was very different. I stared at the screen for a long while. Not because I was surprised she had continued with the program, but because I never imagined she would mention me to someone else, in a space where she couldn't hide behind the shield of being the mother. I arranged to see her that Saturday afternoon. Her room was small, bright, with a window looking out onto a young orange grove just beginning to leaf. She sat at the table, organizing a stack of notes, glasses sliding down her nose, hair now mostly gray. When she saw me, she didn't get up, only gestured for me to sit. "How are you?" she asked, her voice even. "Good. I'm preparing to launch a new community campaign. It's about financial education for young people who've lost their housing." She nodded, as if that was something she had already begun to accept. Celia said, "Today you might hear something I've never said before, if you're ready." I sat straighter, neither nodding nor refusing. "I used to think if you didn't need me, it meant I had failed. That your independence was because you had been pushed away. But maybe I was looking at it from the wrong angle." She rested her hand on the open notebook, lines of text underlined and crossed. Acceptance. Not identifying with control. "You don't need me anymore," she went on, eyes fixed on the page. "And that is what makes me proud." I said nothing. From anyone else, those words might have sounded like small talk. But from her, the woman who had once forced me out of the house without warning, it felt almost like surrender. Not to me, but to the truth itself. "Do you plan to see Ethan?" she asked after a few minutes of silence. I shook my head. "I heard he's staying temporarily in Arizona. A friend in finance told me he's in debt nearly $200,000 from failed investments. Claire's still in Boston," she added. "She calls sometimes, but never mentions the past." "And Darren moved back here," I said. "He's working for a nonprofit in education. Last week, he helped me pack books for the first distribution run from the foundation." My mother looked up, her eyes flickering with something close to regret. "Darren is the only one who's asked me if you're okay. As for me, I only read updates in the therapy reports." I didn't blame her anymore. That heaviness had fallen away long ago. What I needed now wasn't apology or even recognition, just honesty no matter how late it came. That afternoon, I returned to my new office, a small loft on the top floor of an old downtown building, the headquarters I had rented for the Lighthouse Fund. Harper had chosen the name, saying I had once wandered in fog yet never lost my way. The walls were painted a warm clay color, sunlight streaming through the windows like honey. On a small wooden shelf sat donated items from the community. Career guides, brand new backpacks, notebooks, and even handwritten letters from people who had once been helped. I hung a new frame on the wall behind my desk. A blurry black and white photo, but one I remembered clearly. In front of the old house, 20 black trash bags lined up in rows, each holding a piece of my life others had deemed worthless. I hung it not to remind myself of hurt, but to remind myself that I had once stood at the very bottom of rejection and still rose on my own feet. Harper walked in, carrying 2 peach teas and a stack of draft papers. "Are you sure you want to hang that in the reception room?" she asked, setting the cups down. "I want people to know," I replied, "that from places seen as worthless, something meaningful can still grow." She nodded, then pointed to the bulletin board. 32 requests came in this week. Someone from as far as Nebraska, Kentucky, and even a 17-year-old boy from Michigan kicked out by his mom for refusing to give up his art scholarship. I smiled, opened my laptop, and typed his name onto the priority list. Every day I work now, it wasn't to prove anything to anyone. Each email I sent, each plan I reviewed, every call I made to advise someone, it was because I wanted to, not because I feared being abandoned. Family was no longer a place where I had to bend or strain to be accepted. It was something I built with trust, with clear boundaries, with choosing people who cared without needing blood ties. And when someone asked me, "So, how's your old family now?" I just smiled. Family doesn't have to be the people you're born into. It can be the ones you choose to keep, even when no one requires you to. If you've made it this far, perhaps you too have lived through a moment like mine when you realize that peace doesn't always mean holding on to relationships labeled blood. Every person has their limits. And sometimes learning to say no is the beginning of a life worth living. I hung that photo of the trash bags not to reopen wounds, but to affirm this: I stepped out of the wreckage. And if I could do it, anyone can. The question is, will you keep enduring, or will you stand up to rewrite your own story? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? Have you ever had to learn forgiveness but not forget? Share your story in the comments, because I believe every honest word has the power to ease the heartache of someone out there. And if you find yourself resonating with this journey, subscribe to the channel. There will be more stories to come about family, about love, about the pains that feel impossible, but that can become strength. Because sometimes what seems like the end is really the beginning.